Welcome to week 13 of the NFL season. I guess it's already started, but week 13 upon us, the fantasy playoffs coming up soon, and we're going to get you ready for everything, all the action here on Sunday with the War Room powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings.com. Of course, by we, I mean myself and Pat Thorman. Pat, what's going on today? Lots to consider, but how you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm excited to get help everybody get to the playoffs if this is their last week trying. DFS is interesting. There's a lot of this game's about a lot of huge totals, but a lot of them are sneaky shootout possibilities. So you can really make some interesting lineups this week. So yeah, I'm ready to rock.
Yeah, the lineup possibilities, especially on FanDuel this week, are they're sort of all over the place. It's been a lot of fun and a little challenging at the same time putting some of these lineups together. But we're like we do on this show, we're going to roll through your start-sit questions, any other questions you might have. Of course, we always take dynasty questions if you ever have those too, by the way. And then we'll hit up some of these inactives. But let's get to the questions first. And George, you're certainly not a first time, definitely a long time, has a question for us here, and he's asking McFadden, Ivory, or West in a half-point PPR. What do you think about that, Pat?
I'm Ivory for sure. I'm a little bit lower on McFadden, I think, than most rankers this week. I mean, that's a game with two really slow-paced teams that I don't think there's a lot of volume to it. Obviously, without Romo, that takes the ceiling down. I think Ivory is going to be part of a fairly high-scoring game. Giants' run defense struggles, so that's the way I'd go.
Yeah, and they also were going to be without their essentially most of their linebackers now because Beason's out for the season. Devon Kennard's banged up. It doesn't sound like he's going to go. We could see Jonathan Casillas every down. We could see potentially Jasper Brinkley every down. That's not good for the Giants whatsoever. So I do agree with you there. And Ivory, I mean, the half-point PPR aspect, that's the one thing you do have a little bit of concern with because Bilal Powell. But I do like Ivory's ceiling this week, so I would go with him as well. And then he has an IDP question. He's asking about Michael Kendricks or Corey Graham. It's tricky. In this situation, I would probably lean towards Graham just because he is playing at home. Keep in mind, Buffalo is, there's that narrative out there that Buffalo gives out the most. No, they don't. New York Giants home crew gives out the most tackles. Buffalo is a top 5 venue, so you do like that for fantasy purposes. Probably lean there a little bit towards Corey Graham. Close, but. And then also a question about Jake Ryan for dynasty purposes. I do like Jake Ryan. I'd like to see them trust him to play every down. But smart player, sort of just like a prototype linebacker. He's a ultra poor man's Luke Kuechly in the way that he plays the game. Jake Ryan, I'd like to see them trust him. Oh, boy. Mute your mics, folks. It says it there. Mute the mics. But I would love to see them trust him every down. But the way he does play, like I said, and don't say that I'm comparing him to Luke Kuechly, but that's sort of the style of a player that I see out of him. So I do like him for dynasty purposes in the long term. He's definitely somebody I would stash in a deeper league, but otherwise not going to get too crazy about him in redrafts this season. So, Pat, I guess probably let's get to the starting spot this week would be this Patriots offense, and obviously your finger more on the pulse there than maybe others. So what's your expectation here for Danny Amendola? I mean, obviously we're hearing Schefter, when Schefter tweets that he's going to play, you're looking at pretty much 99% that he's going to play. So, I mean, thoughts and expectations for Danny Amendola, maybe across the board for the Patriots offense, Scott Chandler. We know Brandon LaFell in a good matchup here against Eric Rowe. LeGarrette Blount as well. The Eagles have been a sieve against the run. So, I mean, just your general thoughts about the whole team.
Everyone's a play. I think the only one I think is getting a little bit too much attention is probably Chandler. I mean, though his price on daily sites is super cheap, so he should pay that off. But you saw last week they attacked Denver with the tight end, even when Gronkowski was still on the field. That's their weakness. The Eagles are pretty strong against the tight end, and they're weak on the outside. So I could see the Pats starting off, throwing the ball a lot, maybe trying to spread them out. The game's going to be played with a lot of tempo. It's definitely on the Eagles side, potentially on the Patriots side. But I think once they get a lead, I think you're going to go with Blount. I mean, the Eagles have a pretty good pass rush. That's been an indicator. Non-conference games with the teams that have good pass rushes, Dallas, Washington, they really went with Blount pretty heavily. So I expect that to be the case. The Eagles have been giving up plenty of yards on the ground over the last couple weeks. So I think the game script sets up to be a Blount second half. And he's not getting a lot of buzz. Brady's getting a ton of buzz this week. He's getting his weapons back. So I think that's a nice pivot as well. But Amendola, fine PPR play. I think he sees, 7-target floor. Absolutely. I can see double digits very easily. LaFell's got an advantage on the outside, like you mentioned, against Rowe. So, yeah, play your Patriots.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate weekend to be an Eagles fan for sure. But, yeah, I do agree with you there. And we're getting some more start-sit questions coming in. We're also getting the inactive news coming in as well. So let's hit up these questions first. From Rob, he's saying in a non-PPR, Emmanuel Sanders or Deshaun Jackson. I'm going to lean Sanders there, Pat. I don't know about you, but Jackson's so boom or bust. Sanders seems to have a nice little chemistry there with Brock Osweiler. It's not an ideal day. He could see his share of Jason Verrett today. We're not entirely sure who they're going to prioritize. But if they do prioritize Demaryius Thomas, then Sanders could be in store for a decent day.
Yeah, I agree. Sanders is the better floor play, and he might have just as good of a ceiling. Like you mentioned, Djax is a boomer bust option, and like I mentioned with that the Cowboys Redskins game, is probably not going to have quite the volume that the Chargers Broncos game will.
Yeah, and then he goes in a running back question: Charcandrick West, Spencer Ware, and Langford, and for me this is a pretty easy one. It's Charcandrick West. You look at the timeshare situation, certainly Langford's going to be involved. The matchup's awesome, don't get me wrong, love the matchup, but Forte is there. Forte is still the lead dog, he's still the better player, and it's more the 1A than the 1. And by the way, it is 1 and 1A, not 1A and 1B, folks. Horse racing stuff. But that's for our horse racing show in the off season. Anyway, Charcandrick West, Spencer Ware. We'll see where we will, but West is the better passing down back. He's still pretty good in early down work as well. So I think it's Charcandrick West there, Pat.
Yeah, and until we see different, he is the one to Ware's 1A, and on the other hand, Langford is the 1A to Forte's 1. So I think that's just the way you got to go until we have more information on exactly how these splits are going to go. I mean, Forte had 55% of the snaps last week. That's not going to go the other way. If it's going to move, it's going to move in Forte's favor. So I'm treading a little more lightly with Langford this week.
Now the other question here. Kyle actually has 2 questions. Sorry about that. And I'm going to go with the second question first, actually. This is an interesting one. He's asking a PPR between Mark Ingram, Sean Drone, and C.J. Anderson. And obviously, you lock Ingram in. That's no-brainer for me out of those two. Despite the matchup, doesn't matter. The volume potentially there. Ingram still top 12, top 10 play. But the other is really close for me, Pat. In fact, I have them ranked back-to-back. I'm going to lean Drone, as crazy as that is, but I'll tell you exactly why. And the reason is sort of disjoined from the game itself, but it's Eddie Lacy. And what I mean by that is we saw Eddie Lacy rebound. It was the Eddie Lacy we thought we were going to get, and then, of course, he's a knucklehead outside of, missing curfew, all that. And he killed people for fantasy purposes this week. So not saying that's going to happen with Anderson, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility, whereas with Drone, I mean, he's pretty much the guy. It's not ideal, but he's a decent receiver, and that's where he's gotten a lot of his fantasy points over the last couple weeks here. So I would actually lean Drone, as crazy as that is.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly safer. He played 100% of the snaps last week. He's going to get the volume, and that's going to give you a solid floor. If you are in a matchup where you're a big underdog, if you're going for the points title and you're not worried about necessarily a win this week, I think C.J. Anderson is the play. There was a tweet I think Schefter sent out this morning that he might start getting a little more of the share in that backfield. He was by the eye test, he was the better runner last week. You can see it on the field, and he has looked better recently. The matchup is cherry too. So if they are going to pound the ball, if they do get a lead and C.J. Anderson does get 22 touches, I think his ceiling is much higher than Drone. So go Drone for floor, C.J. for ceiling.
Yeah, well, I mean, and if you could guarantee me 18-plus touches with Anderson, then it's a no-brainer, but I don't know if you can guarantee that. That's the problem. So you're right. It depends on your matchup. If you're a dog, you need points, then go Anderson there. The other question he has is he needs one player here in a PPR format. Beckham, Martavis Bryant, Eric Decker. Come on now. The answer's obvious. Go with the guy who's made two of the best catches in NFL history, and that obviously is Odell Beckham. Or is it to go along with Odell Beckham? That's tough. I misread that. I'm going to go Martavis Bryant there. Between Decker and Bryant, it's tough. Decker, all he does is catch touchdowns. He's so consistent with it. The matchup is decent because he's not going to see the outside coverage. That's where you don't want to be. You don't want to be outside against the Giants. Inside in the slot, that's the matchup to take advantage of. But still, Bryant is just a beast, and love his ceiling.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think I have him back-to-back, and if not, I think I have Martavis 11 and Decker 13. It's that close. Do love Deckers for the reasons you mentioned, but Martavis could really, really do damage this week. He did some damage against the Colts last year. Now that was his first blow-up game. He kind of introduced himself. So yeah, I have Martavis slightly ahead of Decker.
Yeah, I agree with you there. All right, Scott says, "Sup guys, sup Scott." Non-PPR, John Brown or Kamar Aiken? That's an interesting question, a question we didn't think we would be asking two and a half months ago. And then also, yes, Marcus Mariota or Russell Wilson. And I will go with the first one here. You look to this, and Kamar Aiken, he's the guy, and yet I still am a little reluctant here. It is close for me. I'm going to lean John Brown, but I wouldn't fault you if you play Kamar Aiken. And then the other one, I'm going to go with the guy who's thrown 8 touchdown passes in the last 2 weeks. Also, keep in mind, Marcus Mariota, the last time these two teams played, it was a long time ago. It was 2 weeks ago. He had 0 touchdown passes. He had that one, the pylon, right, touchdown, but that was a running touchdown. Otherwise, 0 touchdown passes in that game. So for me, Russell Wilson and John Brown. What do you think, Pat?
I'm with you on both calls. I do think Mariota is going to play a little better than he played 2 weeks ago. That was a Thursday night game. He didn't have as much time to prepare. I think this game has a little more potential to score than it did the last time. But I still you got to go with Wilson in this instance. And the non-PPR plays a role too with the Aiken and Brown. Aiken's going to get fed. If it's a PPR, it's a little bit closer because Brown is not as consistent with his target load. But Brown can bust one at any minute. And I think that game's going to be a little bit closer than the people assume. The Rams do play division games tight somehow. They just managed to do it, and the line has gone down a little bit as well. So I think some of the sharps are thinking the same thing. So they might keep it an aggressive stance as far as the passing game in that game, a little bit deeper into the contest than we thought.
You'd think. I mean, their defense has been absolutely terrible, though, with Robert Quinn out, and it looks like when I have Arizona here, I don't have St. Louis yet, but I'm assuming he's going to be out in this game. So you'd think it's a tough one because, we've seen these AFC West games or NFC West games. That is, the San Francisco game alone, that was a really surprising game. Although San Francisco apparently only likes to play football when they're at home. But either way, it should be pretty interesting. And that's close. That is really close. But yeah, you're right. The non-PPR aspect, the standard league, is really what puts it over the top for me here. So let's look at some of these inactive actives. You look to the Jets and Giants. I have the whole game here. No big surprises. You have Revis out, though. Obviously, we knew that was going to happen. Marcus Williams also out. That would be the backup to Darrelle Revis, all right? We are going to potentially see, D. Milner? That this could be bad, or it could be good for Odell Beckham. So you love that there. And then on the other side, like I said, the linebackers banged up for the Giants. So that potentially bodes well for Chris Ivory. Also bodes well. That's the part of the field where you see a lot of Eric Decker. So, Pat, general thoughts about this game? I mean, Odell Beckham Jr., Eric Decker we talked about already, but any other players you'd like to hit on?
Yeah, I definitely like the Eli Odell stack. That's getting pretty chalky, although Eli differentiates Odell a little bit. Will Tye is showing a little something at tight end, and if you're not about that Rube life, which at this point I don't know how you can be, and Harris is a little bit too risky for you. Tye's pretty cheap. You can throw him in there with Eli and Beckham, and that's a pretty good stack. And I'd love the double stack on the other side. Fitz, Marshall, and Decker. Marshall does have a tougher draw, like you said, on the outside, but he does move into the slot on a third of snaps. And Fitzpatrick, he went to Harvard. He's a heady guy. He's shown the ability to go against the weaker matchup repeatedly. He did that in the Colts game when Vontae Davis was on Marshall for a while. He went to Decker. So I like that stack. I think this game's got a little more scoring potential than the over-under has to say.
Yeah, it should be an interesting game. It feel bad for the Jets having to be in the away locker room in their home stadium, but either way, it's always an odd situation when you have two teams sharing a stadium. But cool that these two teams get to face off this year, once every 4 years, really, that these teams get to face off. So good stuff there. Rob asks us about kickers. How do we pick them each week? I put names in a hat and I pick them out. And daily, I mean, you can use matchups. You certainly can use matchups to your advantage. You can look to there's a couple sites that you can certainly use. ESPN has a very basic set of matchup information, but a good site as well that you can kind of tinker around with besides us is I use FF Today sometimes. It's a free site, so it's out there, and they have some good information as well. Use all the information at your disposal, though. We obviously have tons of tools here at Pro Football Focus, and of course, dabble around elsewhere. Always come back to us, though. But you use the matchup information. You look at this. You see, okay, well, the Raiders give up a lot of points to kickers. The Ravens give up points to kickers, and then you look on the other end. The Kansas City Chiefs don't. I mean, you can do that for sure. Otherwise, kickers are not easy. It's sometimes no rhyme or reason to it, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, you want to avoid big underdogs because they're not kicking field goals in the second half. Usually you want to gravitate toward teams that are the favorite, tacking on a field goal in the second half. You kind of think of the game flow of what you're going to have. This is a place where weather does actually come into play. If you're looking at 20-mile-an-hour plus winds, you probably want to avoid that. They're not going to be hitting long field goals. You also can look at teams that stall in the red zone. The Jaguars. Myers has been great because the Jaguars get in the red zone and they forget how to move the ball. So that's one way to look at it. And if you're in DFS, going cheap is not is not a bad idea because they are unpredictable. So you might as well save some money.
Yeah, absolutely. Save money. Find the good matchups. Use all the information at your disposal. That's the key thing. And you say John Brown. John Brown's been very up and down this year, and it really depends on the Giants. If they can move the ball, he's going to have a reasonably good game. I expect them to move the ball today. Now, keep in mind the Jets' pass rush is pretty good, but Eli's been fairly effective. He's for his up and down nature. He's been relatively wise this season, made smart decisions a lot of the time. So I don't expect it to impact that much. Plus, the secondary situation is not ideal for the Jets, so they should be able to move the ball. I think Brown is a decent enough play. He's a top 10 play for me this week. So you got that. But I try not to overthink kickers too much, Pat. Either way, let's go on to this next question from Charles. He's a PPR format. Brandon Cooks, Funchess, or Parker. Oh, boy. Which is why I say, oh, boy, is Funchess we're tossing out. I'm not worried. Funchess long-term, we'd like to see him, progress and learn the position more and hopefully round into a good pro because with Benjamin and Funchess on opposite sides, that's great for that team. But you go down to Cooks and Parker. Parker, massive ceiling, low floor, but Cooks goes up against Josh Norman. He's going to see Josh Norman, I expect, at least 70% of the time this week. Norman will not kick to the slot, so we're not going to see a true shadow situation. But that's a huge downgrade, and Cooks did struggle against Norman the last game. I think he had about 70 yards in that game, but most of it was not in Norman's coverage. So, boy, oh boy, Pat, I think the smart play is still put Cooks in there, but it's really close.
Yeah, it is close. The PPR aspect does help. I'm imagining Willie Snead. I don't know if he's been ruled out for sure, but it looks like he was doubtful. So Cooks is going to take on a pretty big role no matter what. And Sean Payton's a smart guy. If Norman isn't covering in the slot and if Tillman's not around and you can get him matched up on Bené Benwikere in the slot, he's probably going to do it as much as he can. You'd hope. So he's definitely got the higher floor than Parker. Parker is the ceiling play. It looks like Stills isn't going to play. He's going to get plenty of snaps. He should get plenty of work there. And the Ravens are pretty rough against the pass.
And the other question we have is Blake Bortles or Drew Brees. And this is where we are. This is what it's come to. I expect volume from Drew Brees. So that there is potentially a plus here, and if our projection model actually loves Drew Brees. I have these guys ranked back to back, but in my most recent update, I did move Drew Brees ahead. So I am going to go with Drew Brees here. I can't believe this is close, but it is actually close. But for me, Drew Brees, Pat.
Yeah, I have him back to back as well, and I think I have Bortles ahead of Brees. I know my rankings up. I probably would throw this whole hangout into a tailspin if I tried doing it right now. But yeah, I think I have Bortles one ahead of Brees. I'm pretty low on him this week. I just don't see how they move the ball consistently. Like you said, volume is on his side. Carolina does play slower on the road. I think they're going to take control of this game, and I just I can't believe I feel better about Blake Bortles than Drew Brees. We've come a long way.
Yeah, it's rough, but the matchup for Bortles reasonably good against Tennessee. Tennessee is a better defense than people realize, but he's shown that he can get the job done. And keep in mind, Allen Hurns out. By the way, Allen Hurns out, so Allen Robinson, obviously, you like that. But Julius Thomas, he's the guy who I've been looking at as a GPP option for sure this week. I expect some heavy volume, target volume for him, and the matchup pretty good. Tennessee has been relatively bad against tight ends recently. Obviously, last week they allowed 2 touchdowns to the position, Antonio Gates. So looking through some of this news here, and nothing major stands out in terms of active, inactive. Devontae Freeman is going to be back this week, Pat. Obviously, that's good. That's very good for somebody who has lots of Freeman shares. But keep hearing this. Well, the Buccaneers are a good run defense. The Buccaneers are a good. I'm not buying that. Okay, Gerald McCoy is not playing in this game. First and foremost, that's a big deal. And then on top of it, they've really struggled to cover running backs coming out of the backfield. And last I checked, Devontae Freeman is pretty good at that. So I don't know. What are your thoughts and expectations for Freeman today in the comeback game?
Yeah, I don't see him, getting 22, 25 carries, but like you said, he's their passing down back. That's kind of how he won the job. And I think Marquez Smith is also out for the Bucs. I like Matt Ryan today. I know he's stunk over the last month or so, but the last good game he had was against Lovey's defense. Jacob Tamme has a pretty good success rate when Hankerson is out. He's out for the rest of the season. I think the Falcons' offense gets back on track this week, and Devontae Freeman is a huge part of that. He keeps the chains moving. They've obviously missed that over the last couple of weeks. So yeah, I think the Falcons kind of get it back together this week on offense.
Jacquez Smith is inactive, yes, and George Johnson. Yeah, it's a tricky one. And George Johnson is well inactive. So basically, their defensive line is really scraping the bottom of the barrel here. So that's good for the Falcons, good for the offense. We just, they can't turn the ball over. They can't do these silly turnovers they've been doing all season long. And if they can handle that and control the rock, they'll be potent today, I believe. Safarian Jenkins going to be back for the Buccaneers, so we get to look at him again. Haven't seen him for a long time. It seems like all the way back in September was the last time we saw him. So I'm not starting him. I'm looking at him for dynasty purposes here, a little bit of scouting, if you will, but not going to start him this week. I know some people were asking questions about that. Moving to the Texans and Bills, I think this is going to be a really interesting game. The Texans' defense has been playing very good football. Their offense, it's their offense, but they obviously have been coached up. You got to give a huge credit to Bill O'Brien for what he's been doing so far this season. And, you look to the inactives, and nothing really stands out from the Texans side. Obviously, no worries about DeAndre Hopkins. He's dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury, but nothing big there. On the other side, Nigel Bradham going to be out for the Bills. That's a little bit better for that run game for the Texans, although there's a mess there. Carlos Williams also inactive, so that means more LaShawn McCoy. I don't know how much, though. So I guess there's probably the big question, Pat. LaShawn McCoy, I've seen some people on him. He's been playing really good football recently, but Texans defense. So what do you think about him today?
I think he's pretty sneaky. He doesn't get a lot of mention. Even in good matchups. This one doesn't look like a great matchup. But something that was interesting, I saw that the Bills, the line has been moving in favor of the Bills, even though a lot of the public money is on Houston. So the Sharps like Buffalo. So that kind of puts you on McCoy a little bit more. And then puts you on the Bills defense a little bit more. Hoyer has been known to completely wig out. And it also maybe puts you on Hopkins a little bit more. He's a guy who's going to be super low owned. He burned half the world last week. And everyone's talking about Julio, talking about Beckham if you're paying up. So Hopkins should be super low owned. And if, in fact, Houston does get behind and they're chucking it around a lot, he can certainly pay off for the few people that do invest in him.
Tough matchup, but he's shown that it doesn't necessarily matter for him this season. Up north needs to start one in a standard league, Giovanni Bernard, Frank Gore, or Spencer Ware. And he says, should he sit Amendola for any of the two? I would not sit Amendola today. I think that you have to have a backup plan in place for sure, just in case. But it's really, I think he's going to play and have no problem in this matchup. So I'm not worried about that. The other one's a little tricky, Pat. You look to these guys, and Ware, I think you kind of toss him just because, as we said earlier, Sharkandrick West is really going to still be the primary guy. But then from there, Giovanni Bernard and then Frank Gore, the way he's been playing, I still think that I'm going to start Frank Gore here. I'm not confident in it, but he'd be the guy for me.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, Gore's playing tonight, so I don't know if that really helps you with Amendola at 4. That's a tough one because I do think Gio is in a pretty good spot. I mean, the game flow should be in their favor. Although I do think that actually favors Hill if they do want to give Gio a little bit of a breather, a guy who has shown that he can wear down a smaller back. And if they get up big on Cleveland, whose run defense is not good, I think Hill can be in for a very nice second half today. So yeah, I'm going to go with Gore. Maybe he can catch a few passes. They got Boom Herron there too. Man, this is a tough one, but I'm gonna probably agree and go with Gore.
It's super close. I have these guys ranked almost back to back in my rankings, but I still believe in the old man. Certainly tough one though. And then finally, we got John here asking a tight end question: Jason Witten or Austin Seferian-Jenkins. He says it is a PPR league. Well, either way, I think even in standard, I'm going to go Witten here. We just don't know exactly what we have with Seferian-Jenkins. He certainly played well early on, but I don't know if the target volume is going to necessarily be there, and he is still coming back, and this was a lengthy injury, so you'd like to see him at least get a full game of him before you rely on him for fantasy purposes. So I'm going Witten, Pat.
I think this is going to be one of those floor-ceiling deals. Yeah. Witten doesn't have a very big ceiling. He's proven that, especially with Castle taking snaps. ASJ, the one thing you will say for him, even though it has been a long injury, he's been practicing on a limited basis for like a month and a half. I mean, every week we're like, this is going to be the week. This is going to be the week, and he winds up being inactive. He's finally clear for contact, but his conditioning should be okay. He should have a pretty decent. He has a good matchup. The Falcons don't defend tight ends very well, and if they want to stay away from Trufant on the outside, you're going to get the big guy in the middle. So I think ASJ is the ceiling play. Witten is certainly the safer play if you're confident in your matchup.
All right, that takes us up to 11:59 here. Jay's got one last question here. He's asking Matt Hasselbeck or Manning. Scoring format doesn't matter here. What do you think, Pat?
I'm going Manning. I think he could be a borderline top 5 quarterback this week. I think I have him at 7. But Hasselbeck is interesting. I like him as a high floor. Maybe a cash game play if you want to save some money on FanDuel.
Yeah, I do like Eli Manning there as well. And thanks for the compliment, John. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Best of luck to you. Hey, the playoffs are coming. We'll be going right up to Week 16. We're not going to do Week 17. You shouldn't be playing in Week 17 anyway. But we'll be back next week. Same time, same place. So for Pro Football Focus, he's Pat, I'm Jeff, and that's a wrap.